Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight on our news.
Just a day after they were terminated, some 30 prison officers are back to work today.
There are over 1,500 passports here at the passport office waiting to be picked up. Stay tuned. We have the details on why some of them have been here so long.
Our news is brought to you by Alive.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Christina Dragovich. Topping news tonight, Progressive Liberal Party Chairman Fred Mitchell slamming as callous and insensitive Education Minister Jeff Lloyd's announcement that dozens of contract workers in his ministry have been fired and there are more terminations coming. Mitchell says Lloyd should not be boasting about letting people go, but should instead be looking for ways to solve the problems in the public education system. Our Jillian Gray reports.
In the wake of that announcement that dozens of Ministry of Education workers who were delinquent in their duties were either fired, suspended, or faced some other disciplinary action, the opposition is speaking out, saying that the Education Minister's comments were shameful, compassionless, and insensitive.
We were basically shocked that a minister of the government would get up and say that he's happy to report that people have been dismissed. I mean, no matter what the reasons, why would you be happy to say that people have been dismissed? It just comes off as callous and insensitive.
Mitchell says that kind of boasting would have never happened under the previous administration, and the minister's callous comments only add to the insensitive rhetoric that he says is becoming a staple of the Minnis administration.
It feeds into the narrative of callousness all across the board with this government, because you have a prime minister who says he doesn't care. Nobody's going to force him to do what is his constitutional duty, so he walks away. And then you have Dr. Dwayne Sands says, well, you know, we're going to change corned beef whether you like it or you don't, not considering the money issues and people have to pay for food. We just eat stir-fried salmon instead. And now you have this, which just tops all. You know, I fired these people, and I'm happy to report it. I think it's irresponsible and very sad.
Mitchell said as far as he knows, contractual workers were a great addition to the Ministry of Education because they fill the void in the public education system. He insisted that there are procedures in place for contractual workers, which he says should govern what happens.
One of them is if you don't show up to work after a particular time, your salary gets coded, which means essentially they stop paying your salary. So that should be happening as a matter of course where that happens. Secondly, if it goes on for too long, the permanent secretary has delegated powers to dismiss the employee.
Commenting on the track record of the education minister, Mitchell says it seems that Lloyd is only describing problems without providing solutions.
If I were Minister of Education, I would be ashamed to say that the only thing I can boast about in the full year that I've been in office is I fired people.
The PLP chairman said more firings should be expected, as it seems to be the political narrative of the Minnis administration.
They believe that this makes them popular with the population because it shows how strict they are. So we're being ruled by disciplinarians, I don't see how it helps them, because what it's going to do is going to contract the economy. It's taking spending power out of the economy. It sends a bad signal out to the private sector that this is the way they're supposed to behave. So all around, don't think it's a good signal. But, you know, they have 35-4, and so they're the geniuses in the House.
Education Minister Jeffrey Lloyd said many of those contractual workers have not turned up for work or have failed to perform. Their contracts expired last June. Reporting for Our News, I'm Jillian Gray.
Just one day after they were fired, 29 prison officers are back on the job tonight. Kyle Joaquin explains.
Just last week, Wilson was elected chairman of the Prison Staff Association, and he said he did not expect to spend his first full week like this. But he said, thankfully, he can take note of his first victory.
Firstly, they were calling to a meeting to state that their services were no longer needed.
And after that meeting, newly installed Prison Staff Association Chairman Ryan Wilson said his union and the public service quickly went into discussion. According to Wilson, the officers are all 50 years of age or a little older and are considered retired officers in the prison system, which states that an officer retires at age 50 or after 30 years of service. Therefore, the 29 officers were working on contract.
These persons are pillars of the organization, and the wealth of knowledge and experience is needed.
Wilson said those officers were called back to another meeting today, this time to be informed that they have been re-engaged.
Those persons were reinstated as a result because of, it could be an HR problem, just filing the paperwork in time, but it was a major oversight. And we don't want our retired officers to be disadvantaged in no way, no shape or form.
Despite those workers being back on the job, what happens next year when their contract expires again, as well as others who reach the retirement age of 50?
At this point, the process is being cleared up, and moving forward, whatever the procedure is, either year to year or them signing on for another 5, will be that employee option.
But all 29 or 30 of them have a job now?
Yes, sir.
As concerns grow about the future of prison officers at the Department of Corrections, the new chairman calls this ordeal a lesson learned.
We don't want the same issue to reoccur with the next generation, because now, like I said, they play an integral part in training the staff. So we would want this issue, if it's an issue, we need it to be rectified so that other persons aren't affected.
For Our News, I'm Kyle Joaquin.
National Security Minister Marvin Dame says the prison officers' contracts expired, and as is the practice, they were reapplying. He insists no one was terminated, and the government only wishes to see those officers who are considered productive back on the job. Well, President of the Trade Union Congress, Obie Ferguson, is expressing his support for the recent nurses' sickout, which forced public clinics on several islands to turn patients away. Ferguson says the nurses not only got their point across, but they also highlighted the explosive situation in the public healthcare system. Jasmine Brown has that.
Ferguson, whose umbrella union comprises both the Bahamas Nurses Union and the Doctors Union, says all is not well within the public healthcare system. In fact, the TUC president says the nurses are just one group of dissatisfied workers, as he pointed to the fact that senior and junior doctors are also fed up.
It's an explosive situation. Anything can happen.
On Monday, more than 200 nurses throughout the Bahamas called in sick, but they returned to work on Tuesday. Minister of Health Dr. Dwayne Sands has since suggested that the issue of sickouts as union demonstrations must be addressed in the future. Asked whether those more than 200 nurses will face disciplinary action, Sands said that discussion is premature. Ferguson says while he was not privy to the sickout, he believes the nurses took action because they felt ignored for too long.
One could do erratic things if you want to, but we're trying to see if we can bring some attention to the government that this is the time to sit down and negotiate intelligently.
The union has raised several other outstanding issues, including arrears owed for mileage, a pay increase for nurses, concerns that some nurses have not been confirmed, better insurance coverage, an increase in on-call allowance for Family Island nurses, and money owed to some nurses. While some have accused the nurses of crippling the healthcare system, Ferguson says all they ever wanted was to be heard, and industrial action was the last resort.
The idea is not to hurt the citizens of this country. That's not the intent at all. But, the citizens put in power members of parliament, a government, to respond to their needs. So if they're there and they're not responding to a request for a meeting.
A meeting has been set for Friday for Public Hospitals Authority and Nurses Union officials. Reporting for Our News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
And it's been weeks since Cabinet finalized Shell Energy North America's successful bid to build a liquefied natural gas plant to service New Providence customers. But details surrounding the deal are still shrouded in secrecy. Re-Earth President Sam Duncombe says this is a far cry from the transparency the Free National Movement promised it would deliver.
We were promised by this government that they would do renewable energy. LNG is not a renewable energy. It comes out of the ground. It's released from the ground when they're digging for oil.
In a 2017 address to the nation, Dr. Minnis, then in opposition, pledged that an F&M government would introduce incentives and tax concessions that would create a robust energy sector, reduce dependence on fossil fuel, and help to maintain the country's pristine environment.
But now it must seem like deja vu for environmentalists.
Already we have 1 or 2 people controlling all of the oil that comes into the country, and those same people are going to be controlling the LNG coming into the country as well. How does that process work where we keep being told, or we were told that we were going to have a transparent government, and it's still not transparent? We still don't know, like, Shell has not done an EIA. How could they give the bid to Shell before an EIA is done? How do they know that's the best plan for us?
More than 10 years ago, the Bahamas rejected a proposed liquefied natural gas plant, yet LNG has resurfaced as Shell Energy North America has secured the bid to build an LNG plant to service Bahamas Power and Light customers on New Providence.
Why are we going ahead with LNG when we know that the dump needs to be fixed? That is probably the safest route all around to deal with the fires that go on at the dump and to provide some power.
Duncombe says climate change continues to be a threat to the Bahamas, yet no administration seems serious about cutting down fossil fuels and making a move to renewable energy.
We live in a country that is 85% of it is 5 feet or less above sea level, and we continue to push the fossil fuel agenda. Not only that, how did Shell get the tender? How did that happen? When was the tender put out? What was transparent about how they arrived at this decision? Because there were other companies that wanted to do LNG here as well.
In other news, 6 months after the Progressive Liberal Party's last convention, which saw a change in leadership, the opposition party is set to host a special convention this summer to address proposed changes to its constitution.
You know that there's going to be a special convention of the party on the 28th of July here in Nassau to deal with the changes in the constitution of the PLP.
The PLP first announced plans to amend its constitution following its crushing defeat at the polls. PLP leader Philip Davis has said these changes will serve the party well as it seeks to realign itself with its core objectives and values. Party chairman Fred Mitchell says plans are also underway to hold a bigger convention later this year.
Of course, the regular convention will take place in the fall.
Still to come on our news, more than 1,600 passports remain uncollected at the passport office. Plus, 2 new Supreme Court justices sworn in. The details after this break.